Problem is evident in many ways. First of all, ethnic and racial minorities are among the poorest and the most marginalized socially and economically in our country. And apart from that, they have been erased from our history, from our official history. So I feel that there's like a superposition or many layers to this type of discrimination. There's historic discrimination in that they have been historically invisibilized and they have been either considered as something of the past that is now extinguished and is not present in society anymore, or completely denied. They never existed. And so that leaves the current ethnic and racial minorities in Argentina who do exist and are present and are struggling in a very difficult position because they have to contest all these different can we say like layers of discrimination. And so yeah, and you know that Argentina presents itself as a mainly white European nation. It prizes itself of being the most European nation of South America, and Buenos Aires is also considered or called the Paris of South America. All that has to do with how official narrative has whitened our history and our population, and and that is quite telling of a big problem that we have, because these minorities do exist, and they are struggling against day-to-day discrimination, day-to-day racism, which, as I mentioned before, is even more difficult because they have been invisibilized. Society thinks that we don't have a problem with that. So yeah, I think it's complicated.
Cool. Next question. Did you do a lot of research about about Argentina, specifically their diversity issues, racism issues?
I did so much research. Yeah, I was just very nervous. I'm very aware of that anti-blackness is global. So I was just like, even within the U.S., you know, it's so anti-black. So I'm like, it's anti-black I'm used to, and then I grew up like navigating. So I'm just like, what would it be like here? And should I say like what I found in my research? I just knew that I searched up specifically like race relations for black women, perceptions of black women, how they're treated, and like there's that stigma like that of promiscuity, and just like people like assume you're a prostitute and like treat you as such, approach you like you're a prostitute. That happened to us actually. And I feel like I've met like two kinds of people. There's those who like a lot of my professors, some of the kids I meet at Ditela, they're like, yeah, Argentine society is profoundly racist, and they call it out for what it is, and they just recognize it. They're like, it's so obvious. And then there's the other half who are like, racism in Buenos Aires? That could never be. I feel like there's only two sides to the spectrum. I don't know, people in the middle. And those are actually, I'd say that's the majority of the kids I meet at DTEL at the school, the Argentine university that I study at, and they're like, no, we're so accepting, like, I don't see you as any different than me. I was like, I know, like, you say that and you never treat me any differently, but you have no understanding of like the nuances and the small things that happen to people who don't look like you, and they just don't grasp it. They're like, what do you mean? They're like, no one like sees you and like says bad things to you. I'm like, well, no, they're not gonna scream at me or anything like that, but they'll stare at me, and that's not cool either, and they just don't really grasp that part of it.
I'd say it's the worst experience. They were all pretty similar. Just being kind of marginalized as a Japanese or a Chinese, and I'm actually South Korean, so I've never had anyone be like, oh, like, say like the right country, and like I understand that because in the States it's also pretty common, like a lot of people mistake me for something else, and I guess a lot of it does come from the fact that me and my siblings don't look the very average Korean, but it's also because I think a lot of people group the major like Asian group as Chinese or Japanese, like it's one of the two. They never really know about the other countries, so that I'm like kind of used to and I understand. So yeah, I don't think it's I've had like the worst of the worst, but just kind of being thrown into that group and being called that on the streets is kind of, or several times, or like this is actually this past weekend when we went out. Some guy came up to me and he was saying like his friend was interested, but then he said Chino, and then I was like, as soon as he said that, I was like, I just like turned around. I like didn't even want to like deal with it. So just very small things like that, and it definitely made me learn more about myself. I didn't know that such things like that bothered me as it did.
Yes, I would say that both countries perceive themselves as not very racist or not very aware or discriminatory against race. That's how each country, that's how the country perceives itself. And the reason that I say that is because in the United States, people have the idea that like racism doesn't exist and there's no like biases. And when I went to Argentina, I felt that that existed as well. In terms of just like people I met and like my host parents, they kind of talked as if racism and like discrimination were not necessarily things that like occurred, at least not outright. So I think that they definitely have those things similar. Another thing that I would say is similar is that like people do stare at you a lot when you look different. That definitely happens in the US. That happens there as well. Yeah.
Bueno, en Argentina sin duda hay un problema de discriminación racial, o varios problemas quizás, pero el que yo más trabajo es relacionado con los pueblos indígenas. Me parece que en ese sector históricamente discriminado en la Argentina, producto también de un genocidio que ha sufrido los pueblos indígenas, con torturas, robo de bebés, campos de concentración, nunca hubo justicia, nunca hubo una reparación del Estado, y aún hoy en día se mantiene esa discriminación, ese racismo estructural. Se notan muchísimas formas, por un lado en la condena a la pobreza de estos pueblos indígenas, por otro lado las leyes que no se cumplen, las leyes que benefician a los pueblos indígenas no se cumplen, muy rara vez el Poder Judicial, los jueces y fiscales hacen cumplir esas leyes. Hay una condena mediática también, muchas veces sectores de los grandes medios de comunicación hablan de manera despectiva y racista justamente hacia estos integrantes de los pueblos indígenas cuando exigen sus derechos. Y me parece que hay también en buena medida sectores de la sociedad, muchas veces sociedad urbana, blanca, que desconoce esos derechos y que trata de forma muy despectiva a los pueblos originarios de Argentina. Tiene múltiples causas, pero fundamentalmente esto, ¿no? Que nunca ha habido una política de Estado para que reparen esa situación de injusticia tremenda que han sufrido los pueblos indígenas de Argentina.
I think that this is what we are taught, and this is what we learned at school. At school we learned that our country is made up of European immigration, and that we are like a melting pot of races, but the races that we speak about are actually immigrants from different European countries. So this is the official narrative that our history was that our country was made up of this, of these different waves of European immigration. So, but this, what is I think is important to stress is that this is a deliberate historical narrative that took some work to create, and we have to question that official narrative because it's not what many different historical events, documents, and our reality today is showing. So.
And so it was a random weekend. It was a warm summer night.
A warm summer night. We were just walking. We were walking around Palermo. Around Palermo, and like this very drunk man came up to us, and he was like, "Oh, do you guys know where Scalabrini Ortiz is?" And we were like, "Yeah." And I was like, "I know where that is, but I don't know where it is." So I was like, "I don't know." And then he kept following us, and then he was like, "Oh, what do you do in the night?" And we were just like, what? I didn't understand. I thought he meant like nightlife instead of like.
No, but like the way he said it, it had very sexual implications. Like he was like, "What do you do in the night?" And I was like, "Nada." And then I pulled her and we kept walking. And he followed us for a couple blocks before he
he was very like, "I need you" or something weird like that. It was very creepy. And like we're not like we've met other black women that don't even go to our program, and like they've had questions like someone just coming up to them in a mall being like, "Cuánto cuesta?" Like,
so it's just like very by men here. The experience is that you're very hyper visibilized and hyper sexualized, but it's not like something you want. It's very uncomfortable. And then just by general here, you just get stared at all of the time. Like going on, like we use the bus a lot, and every time I'm on the bus, it's just like a whole bus of people staring at me and being very evident about it, which is very discomforting, and it's kind of draining too. Like on a hard day, you want to go home and like not really talk to anyone. It's just like you get on the bus and you have to prepare for like people to stare at you like you're not a human being.
Yeah, and even when you stare back, they still stare at you. Like they maintain that staring, and it doesn't make any sense. Because you would expect that any normal person who brought up
make it seem like you're not staring at
It's definitely different, but also I think there are a lot of similarities to the States too. 100%. And I learned that moving from one coast to the other just by itself. Being in a school that's completely in its own bubble in the middle of PA, where people think it's a very liberal area, but definitely there are those aspects of discrimination in the States too. So I don't think being here was a huge difference in being discriminated in some sort of way. So I think that helped, and that kind of helped me mentally cope, I guess, in some aspects of what I was experiencing. I just kind of think to myself, like, honestly, like, it's how it is. And, like, I can't, like, change myself for it, so kind of just accepting who you are as is kind of great.
Like I said, I came in with the knowledge that I would face a lot of these things, so I was just prepared for it and I had that mindset. But if I had not had that mindset, it would have been so much harder. So I think it's kind of just, when you come here, like, I would tell them about Argentine reality and the things that you would face, so that they would at least have, be prepared for what would come, because it's not like you can change what's gonna happen to you, it's gonna happen anyway, but you can change the way you choose to address those difficulties. And as long as you realize that, you're proud of who you are and you're proud of the way you look, and you're cognizant of what's gonna happen to you, I think you can have a good time here.